I had lived 37 years without ever imagining that a family dinner could unravel everything I thought I understood about love, loyalty, and belonging. It started with a phone call, one I almost didn't answer. My mother's voice came through the line, unusually soft, almost sweet. "Emily, you should come home for dinner. It's been too long since we've had the whole family together." I hesitated. For years, I'd kept my distance, not out of spite, but self-preservation. I had learned the hard way that their affection was conditional, transactional, and timed to their convenience. They called when bills piled up. They visited when favors were needed, but still, some part of me, a foolish, hopeful part, wanted to believe that maybe this time would be different. Maybe this wasn't another carefully veiled request in the shape of a warm invitation. Maybe they really missed me. So I drove home. I left behind my San Francisco apartment, my deadlines, my boardroom meetings, and I returned to the house in Sacramento where I had spent my childhood. Half nostalgia, half battlefield. As I pulled into the driveway, the porch light was already glowing. My mother greeted me at the door with a practiced smile, arms outstretched like everything between us had always been fine. Inside, the house smelled like rosemary stew and warm bread. The table was perfectly set, flickering candles dancing beneath the antique chandelier. It all looked so perfect it almost made me believe I had imagined the years of distance. I sat down at the table with my parents, my younger brother Ryan, and my sister Chloe. There was laughter, polite small talk. Wine poured and passed around. For the first 10 minutes, it actually felt bearable. Like maybe, just maybe, I had overthought everything. Then it happened. Ryan leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, a smug ease in his voice. "So, just to avoid any misunderstandings later, Mom and Dad wanted me to let you know. We've finalized the will." The clinking of silverware paused. My hand froze above my plate. He continued smoothly, clearly rehearsed. "The house, the Tahoe villa, the savings accounts. Everything's going to me and Chloe." My breath caught in my throat. I stared at him, unsure if I'd heard right. "What?" Chloe tilted her head, twirling a strand of her hair like this was some casual, harmless announcement. "It's not personal," she said. "Mom and Dad just think it makes more sense." I turned to my mother. She gave a soft sigh, like she was tired of explaining something obvious. "Emily, you're doing so well. You've built a career, your own company, a home. You don't need it. Ryan and Chloe need more support right now." I felt the words hit like a slap. I looked at my father, searching for disagreement, some flicker of discomfort, some hint that he wasn't on board with this. But he just stared into his glass of wine, as if that was easier than looking at his daughter while discarding her. The air in the room shifted. It wasn't just about inheritance. It was the clearest, coldest declaration I'd ever heard: "You're not one of us. You're not needed here anymore." I forced myself to sit still, to breathe, to keep my hands steady in my lap. But something inside me cracked, quiet and sharp. Not from the loss of money or property, but from the realization that I had walked into this house, still believing I was part of this family. And now I knew better. For a long moment, no one said anything. The only sound was the faint clink of my spoon, as I set it gently on the edge of my plate. The stew I'd once found warm and comforting now tasted like ash. I could feel the rage building beneath my skin, slow and cold, rising with every beat of my heart. My eyes moved from Ryan to Chloe, then to my parents. No one looked surprised. No one looked ashamed. Just calm, composed, as if they had all agreed long before I ever walked through that door. I turned to Chloe first. "Support?" I asked quietly. "You're calling this support?" She raised an eyebrow, her tone as syrupy as ever. "Well, you have your own life, Emily. Your company's doing well. You've got your own home, travel whenever you want. You don't need this." I swallowed the bitterness in my throat. "And you do? You haven't held a job longer than 6 months. Ryan still can't stick to a major. And you've both been floating on Mom and Dad's dime for years." Ryan leaned back in his chair, arms folded across his chest, a smirk tugging at the corners of his mouth. "We're just trying to build a foundation, Emily. Not everyone gets lucky like you." I blinked. "Lucky?" My voice trembled with disbelief. "You think what I have came from luck?" Chloe laughed softly, shaking her head. "Come on, don't be so sensitive. Honestly, It's kind of petty, keeping score over a will. Petty, I repeated, a dry, incredulous laugh escaping my lips. Let's talk about petty. Let's talk about how I paid off the mortgage on this house years ago. How I covered the utility bills when Dad lost his job, and no one said a word. The time the roof needed replacing, I wrote the check. The Tahoe Villa renovation. $40,000. You both showed up at that place every summer like royalty, and now you want to pretend like I was never part of this family. Had changed. For 6 years? 2 years ago. To clarify, the mortgage was paid off earlier, avoiding timeline confusion with later recurring payments. My mother's face turned rigid. Emily, enough. I turned to her slowly. No, not this time. Her voice sharpened, the warmth completely gone. We didn't make this decision because we don't love you. We did it because we love all our children. And Ryan and Chloe need this more than you do. My chest tightened. And what about the love you've shown me? Where was it when I stayed up at night, calculating how to cover your medical bills? Where was it when I canceled my plans to help you through hard times? Where was it when I spent my 20s and 30s, pouring everything I had into keeping this family afloat while you called it help? But now that I ask for fairness, it's suddenly greed. I edited, changed, canceled my vacation to help you refinance this house. 2. Canceled my plans to help you through hard times. For consistency, as refinancing isn't mentioned elsewhere. Chloe let out a snide chuckle. You're rich, Emily. Let it go. Why does it even matter to you? Is it really about the money, or do you just want recognition for being the family's personal ATM? ATM? I said quietly, letting the word settle like a bitter pill on my tongue. That's what I've been to you, hasn't it? Ryan gave a mocking shrug. You're making a scene over something that doesn't even affect your life. It's not like you need any of this. This is just another example of you playing the victim. The room blurred for a moment. I felt dizzy, not from shock anymore, but from the clarity of it all. They didn't just exclude me from a will. They had erased years of my sacrifices. They had rewritten history in their favor, and handed me the role of the bitter outsider simply because I dared to ask for acknowledgement. I turned to my father, the last chance, the last hope that maybe, just maybe, he'd say something, anything, to validate me. But he just sipped his wine in silence, his eyes fixed on his glass. Like the guilt didn't even register. Like I was someone else's daughter sitting at his table. I looked at all of them again, one by one, my gaze no longer pleading, no longer searching for answers. I already had them. They didn't need me anymore. And worse, they never really wanted me to begin with. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at them, at their smug, unaffected faces, as the reality sank deeper into my skin like ice water. My mother adjusted her silverware with deliberate grace, acting like nothing was wrong. My father remained motionless, his eyes still glued to the rim of his wine glass, silent in that way he always was when things got uncomfortable. And Chloe, with her carefully manicured nails and practiced smirk, leaned forward like she was about to offer some twisted form of wisdom. No one forced you, Emily, she said lightly, her voice dipped in mock innocence. You chose to help. No one asked you to pay for anything. Edited changed. You made your choices. No one asked you to pay for anything. You just like pretending to be the savior, to a shorter, more natural version for realism, while keeping her dismissive tone. That sentence hit me harder than I expected. It wasn't just dismissive, it was cruel. I could feel something uncoil in my chest, something ancient and buried rising to the surface. I helped, I said, my voice calm but trembling beneath the surface. Because I thought that's what family did. Because I believed if I gave enough, supported enough, stood by you through your chaos, eventually I'd be seen as part of this family. Not just the one who footed the bill. Ryan scoffed. You're acting like a child who just lost their favorite toy. A sharp laugh escaped me. Dry, bitter, unrecognizable in my own ears. A toy. I repeated. Do you have any idea what I gave up to keep this family afloat? Do you know how many nights I spent budgeting your disasters into my life, like they were part of my job description? Do you know how many trips I canceled? How many business investments I passed on? How many chances I let slip? Because I thought helping you mattered more. My mother's eyes narrowed. And now you're throwing it all back in our faces. Is that it? No, I said slowly. I'm finally calling it what it is. Unreciprocated sacrifice. Her mouth twisted into something colder. All you ever talk about is money. That's all you care about. You've always been like this. Calculating. Transactional. Selfish. The word landed like a slap. Selfish. I stared at her, stunned by how effortlessly she twisted the story. How easily she erased everything I had given. How she repainted my sacrifices as something dirty. Shameful beneath her. I stood up. My hands were shaking, but I didn't care. The rage, the pain, the years of trying to prove myself. They were bubbling up, but I wouldn't let them spill out in desperation. Not this time. You think I care about the money, I said, my voice sharper now. It's not about money. It's about respect. It's about acknowledgement. It's about not being discarded the second I stop being useful to you. Chloe rolled her eyes. God, you're so dramatic. Dramatic? I turned to her, my voice rising. You want to know what's dramatic? Being the one who shows up every time the roof leaks. Every time Dad ends up in the hospital. Every time one of you calls in tears because you need another handout. And then being told I'm too well off to deserve anything in return. Ryan leaned forward, his voice low but sharp. You think you're better than us? That's the real issue, isn't it? No, I said firmly. I think I've finally realized I've been lowering myself for years just to feel like I belonged. And I'm done. My father finally looked up then, his expression flat. You don't mean that. I met his gaze without blinking. I do. I mean every word. The silence after that was thick, tense, final, and in that moment, standing at the edge of the dining room, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. I was exhausted. Exhausted from pouring into a well that never gave anything back. From carrying people who would never lift a finger for me. I picked up my bag slowly, adjusting my coat as I headed toward the door. My mother stood abruptly, her voice sharp and frantic. If you walk out that door, don't expect to be welcomed back. I paused with my hand on the doorknob and looked over my shoulder, calm, cold, steady. I never felt welcome here in the first place. Then I walked out. And this time, I didn't look back. The drive home blurred with streetlights as I fought back tears. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary. My jaw clenched so hard it ached. I wasn't sure if I was holding back tears or rage, or both. The farther I drove from that house, the clearer everything became. I had walked into that dinner hoping to feel like a daughter again. I left realizing I was never seen as one to begin with. Hey, edited clarified. The drive home was a blur of streetlights and silence. 2. Blurred with streetlights as I fought back tears. For precision. When I got home, I didn't turn on the lights. I dropped my bag, pulled off my coat, and stood in the dark, breathing through the ache in my chest. Then, as if on instinct, I walked straight to my desk, opened my laptop, and logged into my banking app. I clicked through the list of recurring payments, every single transaction that had kept that house running recently. $500 for the mortgage, they'd restart it after I paid it off. $600 for utilities, repairs, insurance. The credit card I'd been secretly paying off for my parents so they could avoid defaulting. The hidden costs of being their successful daughter. Edited. Added, they'd restart it after I paid it off, to reconcile earlier mortgage payoff with ongoing payments. And just like that, I started canceling them. One by one. My fingers moved steadily, no hesitation. With each click, something loosened in my chest. It wasn't revenge. It was liberation. When the final confirmation screen flashed across the monitor, recurring payment successfully canceled, I sat back in my chair and exhaled. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. I didn't expect silence to last long. The next morning, my phone started ringing. First it was my mother, then my father, then Chloe. I let them all go to voicemail. I didn't need to hear the panic in their voices to know what they were calling about. I made coffee, sat by the window, and waited. Eventually, I played the first message. My mother's voice, sharp and incredulous. Homily. What the hell is this? Do you have any idea what you've done? This house is barely staying afloat. The second message. Don't be so selfish, Emily. Family is supposed to help each other. You're punishing us for a misunderstanding. The third. Call me back. Right now. I didn't. I didn't owe them anything anymore. Not my time, not my money, not my silence. Later that afternoon, my father called. That one, I let ring through to voicemail without a second thought. His message was quieter, calmer, but no less manipulative. Emily, sweetheart, this has gone far enough. Your mother's upset. Just come by, let's talk. We can fix this. Fix what? The betrayal. The years of being used and discarded. I laughed, a dry, hollow sound that barely felt human anymore. Then came Chloe's turn. A string of texts so predictable I could have written them myself. So pathetic. You're ruining this family. Honestly, you always thought you were better than us. If you didn't want to help, you should have said so from the beginning instead of playing the victim now. I stared at her words, my thumb hovering over the screen. And then, with a strange kind of peace, I blocked her number. Then Ryan's. Then my parents'. Their names disappeared from my contact list, like dust brushed off a surface that had been dirty for far too long. And just like that, silence returned. But this time, it didn't feel heavy. It felt like freedom. 3 days passed in silence. Sharp, dangerous silence. No calls, no texts, no doorbell ringing in the middle of the day. It was the kind of stillness that didn't feel like peace. It felt like waiting. Like the calm before something ugly. Then it came. Friday afternoon. I was in a conference room at work, reviewing notes before a client presentation, when my phone buzzed violently. A message lit up the screen. It was from my mother. Emily, the family is having a meeting. 7 p.m. at the house. This isn't an invitation, it's your responsibility. There was no apology. No hint of reconciliation. Just a command. Like nothing had changed. Like I was still the obedient daughter who'd drop everything and show up on demand. For a moment, I considered ignoring it. But some part of me, a stubborn flicker of curiosity, wanted to see what their next move would be. So I typed a single word in response. Fine. When I pulled into the driveway, Ryan's sleek BMW was parked beside Chloe's obnoxiously pink Mini Cooper, lined up like trophies. The porch light was already on. The front door opened before I could even knock. My mother stood in the doorway, smiling with that same tight, lipped expression she wore when she thought she was being gracious. Emily, she said, almost sweetly. You finally came home. I stepped inside, and everything felt smaller, colder, unfamiliar. The living room, once filled with warmth, now seemed staged, artificial. My father sat in the center of the room, arms crossed, jaw clenched. Ryan lounged on the armrest, a smug expression on his face. Chloe was draped across the sofa like she was holding court. I didn't sit, not yet. So? I said, folding my arms. What is this about? My father cleared his throat, his tone clipped. We need to resolve the tension. This situation is tearing the family apart. I let out a dry laugh. Tension. You mean the fact that I stopped paying your bills? My mother jumped in, trying to smooth it over. Emily, you overreacted. We didn't mean to hurt you. Your father and I only wanted what was best. Ryan scoffed. Did you even think before cutting us off like that? Do you know how reckless and selfish that was? My fists clenched at my sides. Reckless. Selfish? I stepped forward, my voice tightening. I kept this family comfortable for over a decade, while pretending it was all normal. And now you call me selfish because I dared to stop bleeding for you. High edited shortened. I kept this family afloat for over a decade. You lived in comfort off my back while pretending it was all normal. To avoid repetition of sacrifices. Chloe straightened, her voice calm but venomous. You're just angry because you didn't get a share of the inheritance. Let's be honest. I turned toward her, my gaze sharp. Don't confuse anger with clarity. I'm finally seeing you all for who you are. My mother stood abruptly, voice raised. If you walk out that door again, don't expect to be welcomed back. I stared at her for a long moment. My hand hovered near my coat. I was never truly welcomed in the first place, I said, voice steady. And I'm not here to ask for it anymore. But I had barely turned when Ryan laughed under his breath. You think you've won something? You'll be back when you cool off? You always are? High edited, changed. You think cutting us off makes you powerful. You'll come crawling back. You always do, to a more natural, smug tone while keeping his intent. I paused. My hand curled into a fist. Then I walked out. But this time, I didn't just walk away. I slammed the door behind me. And I meant it. And somehow I knew they weren't done yet. And I was right. That same night, I got home and froze in front of my apartment door. Shady Ted added, that same night, to clarify timing of vandalism. It was covered in thick spray paint. Crude words scrawled across it in red, dripping like blood. Had it changed, sealed shut, completely covered in thick, grayish, white expanding foam, to spray paint for plausibility, as foam sealing felt overly dramatic and inconsistent with Ryan's later consequences. Someone had deliberately sabotaged my door, and I didn't need to wonder who. My pulse spiked. I pulled out my phone, opened the security camera app, scrolled back through the footage. There he was. Hoodie, baseball cap, but unmistakable. Ryan, standing in front of my door with a can of spray paint in his hand and a smug grin on his face. Edited adjusted to match spray paint change. That was his message. But he picked the wrong target. Because I wasn't scared. I was furious. And this time, I wasn't going to play nice. I stood in front of my apartment door, fists clenched, breath heavy with fury. The spray paint had dried, the words glaring under the hallway light. The air was cold, but my blood ran hotter with each passing second. I didn't even need to ask who did it. I already knew. He edited adjusted to match spray paint change. I opened the security camera footage again, scrubbing back to the exact time I'd left for the family meeting. There he was, Ryan, hood pulled low, baseball cap shadowing his face. But his gait, his grin, the arrogance in every movement, it was unmistakable. I watched him raise the can, shake it once, and begin painting across my door. Not rushed, not nervous, deliberate, confident. Like he thought this was a joke. Like he believed I'd come crawling back after this. Humiliated and scared. High edited adjusted to match spray paint change. He couldn't have been more wrong. I took screenshots of every frame, his face, his stance, the can in his hand. I saved everything. Then I called the police. 30 minutes later, a young officer stood beside me in the hallway, examining the defaced door with a look of restrained disbelief. I showed him the footage, explained what happened in clear, even tones. Hey, edited, changed, sealed door. To defaced door, for consistency. Do you want to press charges? He asked, pen hovering over his notebook. I looked him straight in the eye. I didn't call you here for a friendly chat. His nod was brisk. Understood. We'll start the formal report. He glanced down at the footage again. That's your brother. Not anymore. By the next morning, the calls started again. My father this time. I let it ring once, twice, then answered. Emily, he said, his voice already lined with guilt. Does this really have to go this far? I didn't answer right away. I let him sit in the silence he'd always used against me. You know Ryan didn't mean harm, he added quickly. He was upset. It was a mistake. I laughed, sharp and bitter. A mistake. He vandalized my door, Dad. What if I'd been inside and needed to get out? You call that a mistake? Had it adjusted, sealed my door shut, vandalized my door, and simplified the hypothetical for realism. He paused, scrambling for excuses. He just lost his temper. He lost more than that, I said coldly. He lost the privilege of being part of my life. What do you want? He asked, a trace of frustration slipping into his tone. Do you want money to drop this? I smiled without humor. 33,000. What? That's what it'll cost to repair my door, pay the legal fees, and compensate for harassment. If you want this to go away quietly, that's my price? His voice rose. Emily, that's extortion. No, I replied, calm and sharp. That's called consequences. Something Ryan's never had to face. You and Mom have been shielding him from reality his entire life. This is just one more check you'll have to write to keep him from facing it. There was silence on the other end. Then, a heavy sigh. You're tearing this family apart. I let out a low breath. No. This family tore itself apart the moment you decided I was only useful when I was paying for everything. 3 days later, the money arrived in my account. $33,000 was transferred from my parents' joint savings. Edited merged fragments, $33,000. Transferred from my parents' joint savings. Into one sentence for smoother flow. No message. No apology. Not even a thank you. Just a transaction. Cold and calculated, like everything else they'd ever done. I stood in front of my repaired door, running my fingers across the smooth surface. feeling the weight of that chapter finally begin to lift. It wasn't about the money. It never was. It was about finally making them face the consequences of their entitlement. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one cleaning up their mess. They were. And I was finally done carrying them. I thought the payment would be the end of it. $33,000 wired to my account. Cold, silent, final. I figured they would take the loss, retreat into their bruised egos, and finally leave me alone. But I underestimated them. Losing money was one thing. Losing control over me, that was something they couldn't accept. It started with the guilt, tripping messages from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. Aunt Linda. Emily, your parents sacrificed so much for you. How could you repay them like this? Uncle Ray, money comes and goes, but family is forever. Cousin Danielle. You're really going to turn your back on your own blood. That's shameful. I read each message with growing disgust, knowing exactly where they came from. My mother. When she couldn't manipulate me directly, she pulled strings behind the scenes, poisoning every ear she could reach, twisting the story until I was the villain who abandoned her poor, aging family out of greed. She didn't tell them about my years of support. The bills. The emergencies. No, she told them I was heartless, that I had left them to suffer, that I had turned my back on a struggling family just to keep a few extra dollars in my account. Hey, edited shortened. The mortgage I paid for 6 years. The bills. The renovations. The tuition fees. The emergencies. The vacations where I picked up every check to avoid repetition, as these were detailed earlier. But I wasn't going to stay silent. That night, I opened my laptop, logged into Facebook, and started typing. My hands were steady. My words were sharper than ever. I tried to be a good daughter. I supported my parents financially for over a decade, paying off their mortgage years ago, covering emergencies, helping through tough times. I never asked for anything in return, not even recognition. But when they finalized their will, they left me out of it completely. Their reason. You're successful. You don't need it. When I asked why, I was told I was being selfish. When I stopped supporting them, they called me a traitor. And now they are spreading lies to make me look like the villain. This is my truth. I'm not sharing it for pity. I'm sharing it because there are others like me who've been used by the very people who should have cherished them. To those people, you are not wrong for setting boundaries. You are not selfish for walking away. Edited condensed financial details too. Paying off their mortgage years ago, covering emergencies, helping through tough times, to avoid redundancy. I hit post. Within minutes, the comments poured in. Some supportive, others judgmental. I've been there, Emily. Thank you for speaking up. This is what happens when families treat one member like a bank. You're brave for telling the truth. And then, of course, the critics. Family is sacred. You should have kept this private. Shameful to air out family drama online. But I didn't care. This wasn't about approval. It was about reclaiming the narrative they tried to twist. And judging by the silence that followed, I knew the message hit exactly where it needed to. 3 hours later, my phone rang. My mother. I let it ring, then answered, calm and collected. Emily. What the hell do you think you're doing? She barked, her voice seething. Telling the truth, I said flatly. You're destroying this family's reputation? No, I replied coldly. You did that the moment you decided to paint me as the villain in a story where I was the one carrying everyone else. You're going to regret this. No, I said, with a quiet conviction. You are. I hung up. For the first time, I didn't feel guilt. I didn't feel fear. I felt power. I had taken back my voice, and there was no going back. They could spin their stories, but I had told mine. And now the world could see exactly who they really were. 3 months passed after that final phone call. Not a single message from my parents. No more demands, no more threats, no more guilt. Tripping voicemails from distant relatives trying to drag me back into their narrative. It was quiet, eerily quiet. But for the first time in my life, the silence didn't feel like abandonment. It felt like freedom. I filled my days with things that made me feel alive again. I poured energy into my work, without the financial strain of carrying a household I didn't belong to. I signed up for a photography class I'd always dreamed of taking. I traveled, wandered through unfamiliar cities, tasted new food, breathed air that didn't carry the weight of obligation. 3 months later, I stood in Paris, sipping coffee by the Seine, watching the world go by without anyone demanding a piece of me. 6 months later, I climbed to the top of Machu Picchu, the wind rushing through my hair, and for the first time in years, I felt untethered, light, whole, unburdened. I didn't follow what happened to them, not actively. But stories still found their way to me, drifting through mutual acquaintances like whispers on the wind. My mother had taken a job waiting tables at a small diner. No more shopping sprees, no more spa weekends, no more controlling the room with her polished presence. My father, once the quiet enabler, now worked at a construction supply store. Ryan couldn't hold down a job. Chloe was still chasing influencer dreams. Except now, there were no lavish vacations, no designer clothes to pose in. Their world had shrunk without me holding it up. And I felt nothing. No guilt. No regret. Only clarity. I had given them a chance. More than one. I gave them years of my life, years of my income, years of my loyalty. But they weren't interested in love or gratitude. They wanted control. And when I stopped letting them take, they tried to punish me for it. But they failed. 1 year after walking away, I met someone. Alex. He didn't ask what I could do for him. He didn't measure my value in dollars or sacrifices. He listened. He stayed. He loved me not for how much I gave, but for who I was. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I had to prove my worth to be loved. Standing on my apartment balcony one quiet evening, watching the city lights flicker below, I realized something I wish I had known much earlier in life. They didn't cut me out of the will to punish me. They gave me the greatest gift I never asked for. They set me free. And I finally learned, family isn't always the people you were born to. Sometimes, it's the peace you choose, the boundaries you build, and the love you find when you stop bleeding for people who never deserved you. I didn't lose a family. I reclaimed myself. And I never looked back. Emily's story isn't just about being excluded from a will, it's about years of silent sacrifice, misplaced loyalty, and the painful awakening that sometimes the people we call family can become the very source of our deepest wounds. She gave everything. Her money, time, emotional labor, believing love would eventually be reciprocated. But what she received was exploitation masked as tradition, manipulation disguised as concern. When she finally set boundaries and reclaimed her voice, she was met with resistance, blame, even retaliation. Yet in choosing to walk away, she didn't lose a family. She found freedom. She built a life without debt to guilt, found love without conditions, and created peace on her own terms. Her journey was never about revenge. It was about self-worth. The lesson is clear. You are not obligated to carry the weight of people who only value you when you're useful. Setting boundaries is not betrayal. It's self-respect. Don't wait for others to validate your worth. Sometimes, the most courageous thing you can do is walk away from what hurts, even if it's called family. In doing so, you don't just reclaim your life. You teach others that love must be mutual, respect must be earned, and peace begins where self-sacrifice ends.